I'd like you all to close your eyes. Closed? Okay, now you can't see me right now, but I'm actually riding a unicycle, juggling hundreds of balls. No, keep your eyes closed, though. It's really great, but okay. So close your eyes and picture an engineer. Everyone got a picture in their head? Nod. Okay. Open your eyes. Raise your hand if you pictured a guy sitting alone at a computer. Okay. Maybe kind of nerdy, pocket protector. Raise your hand if you pictured a train driver. That's a lot of hands. Raise your hand if you pictured a young guy in a hoodie. Maybe he looks a little like Mark Zuckerberg, perhaps. Raise your hand if you pictured someone who looks like me. Okay, not a lot of hands. Well, if you didn't raise your hand for me, I'd like you to please get up and leave. No, just kidding. If you didn't raise your hand for me, it's all right. I get it all the time. Usually when I tell people I'm an engineer, they look at me and they say, no, really, what do you do? Or they look at me and say, oh, whoa, you must be some kind of genius. Or my favorite is when I told my mother I wanted to major in engineering. She said, ew, why? The truth is, I'm a female engineer and I'm a minority. Only 11% of engineers in the US are women. So why does this matter? Why do we care? So what? Let's just have the men do all the engineering. Well, engineers are making some of the biggest advances in our society. They're solving things like global warming, making medical breakthroughs, some of the biggest technologies that are changing our lives. These are things that we use every day as people that make our lives better. And with half the population being female, we deserve to have the female perspective. It'll only get better with the female perspective. But today, engineering really is a boys' club, and I don't fit in. But I'm here today to share my story about how I discovered a passion for engineering, and I'm here to make a bold claim. I don't fit in, but I believe that our little girls will. So this is me when I was a little girl, age 6. I was a pretty normal kid. I loved ballet and drawing and riding bikes. I grew up in a small town in Rhode Island, age 6. Coincidentally, this is around the age where most girls start to lose an interest in math and science, this young. And it's interesting, some people think, well, biologically, maybe girls just aren't as good at those subjects, and that's just the way it is. You can't fight nature. Well, there was a study done very recently across 65 countries around the world where they tested boys and girls on the same science test. Around the world, girls outperformed the boys, but not in the US. What this study suggests is that it's not a biological thing. This is a cultural thing. And this is our culture. This is what we grow up in as girls, the toy aisle, the perfect example of our culture, where we are taught from a very young age that we want to become princesses. I remember when I was a little girl, adults would pat me on the head. Well, actually, I come from a Jewish family, so they would grab me by the punum and say, Debbie, you are so smart. Good for you. And I remember as a little girl being so disappointed, wishing that they told me I was pretty. I wanted to be pretty. I didn't want to be smart. And by the time my senior year of high school rolled around, I was applying to college, and I asked my math teacher to write my recommendation letter. And she said, okay, Debbie, well, what do you plan to major in? I'll write it in the letter. And I said, I don't know. She said, how about engineering? I think you would really excel in it. And I thought, engineering. I closed my eyes, and I pictured a train driver. I had no idea what engineering was, and I was way too embarrassed to ask her. I didn't want to sound stupid, but I thought, ugh, no way, ew, engineering. That's for boys, it's intimidating and boring, and why would she ever think that a creative, artistic girl like me would ever like engineering? No way. But I went off to Stanford, which was a big deal. In my high school, they actually announced it over the loudspeaker. And when I got to Stanford my freshman year, I had no idea what to major in. And that message that math teacher had said, engineering, you should give it a try, it stuck in my head. And so I thought, what the heck? I'm going to take ME 101, just give it a try, because I couldn't shake that advice that she had given me. And I was so worried that it was going to be my first F. I was terrified, but I went into the class. And in that class, I finally learned what engineering really was. And to my surprise, we weren't fixing train engines. In that class, we got to invent and design things. We had assignments like make a catapult out of a soda bottle and a piece of string and 5 paper clips and a piece of foam core. It was so cool and so much fun. And in that class, I learned that engineering is really the skill set to build anything you dream up in your head, whether it's a website or a mobile app to a bridge to a highway, anything. That's what engineers build. And what an amazing skill set, how empowering to be able to build whatever you want. But the problem was, I felt kind of alone. I was always one of a handful of girls in my classes, and I did not fit in. In fact, only 20% of undergraduate degrees in engineering and tech and science are awarded to women. So it's a real problem. But I stuck with it. I loved the major, and I wanted to do it. That is until I took an engineering drawing class. This was about halfway through my major, and I thought, engineering drawing, this is gonna be great. I love art, finally, I'm gonna get to draw. The problem was in this class, you had to draw in perspective, draw in 3D. And for some reason, I had this total mental block. I was really struggling with the material. And our final assignment, we had to put our drawings up on the wall for critique. And you could tell, all the guys in the class, there were about 80 of them and 5 of us girls. The guys had scribbled their drawing 10 minutes before and slapped it up on the wall. Meanwhile, I had spent hours, the entire weekend, I didn't even go to any parties, working on my drawing. And when the professors went around the room and they got to my drawing, they took a look at it and they looked out into the room and they said, raise your hand if you think Debbie should pass this class. And I just stood there, beet red, humiliated, looking around. Some people are kind of half raising their hands. I was horrified. And they're like, come on, raise your hand if you think Debbie should pass the class. The room was silent. Finally, my good friend piped up and said, how dare you? How dare you humiliate her in front of this room? She obviously has put a lot of effort in, and it's your responsibility to teach her, not to make fun of her. Well, I'm glad he said that, but even still, the tears were streaming down my face. And I ran out of the classroom, and I thought, this isn't for me. I'm not naturally good at this stuff. Maybe I should just give up engineering. A lot of girls around this time in their college career think the same thing. But my friend came out, and he said, Debbie, don't give up. You can do it, and I'll help you. We just have to work hard together. You'll pick up this stuff. I know you will. So him and I used to go from that moment on to the library, and sometimes we'd be there till 3, 4 in the morning studying. And in that library, I saw all of those guys from my classes, the guys who I thought just knew it and it was so easy for them. They were there at the library at 3 in the morning. I caught them. And I realized that it's not about being a born genius. It's about how hard you work. This stuff takes a lot of work, but I worked really hard, and I redid that drawing, and I earned my degree. Years later, I did some research into this stuff, and I actually learned that I was at a disadvantage. Like a lot of other girls, I had underdeveloped spatial skills. The other interesting thing that I learned is that kids who score better on spatial skills tests grew up playing with construction toys. Well, I thought, isn't this a shame? Me and my little sister growing up, our parents never bought us Legos or Rector sets or Lincoln Logs. We all thought that those were boys' toys. I thought, Those toys have been marketed to boys for over 100 years, and they get them interested in math and science. Meanwhile, all we get are the dolls and makeup kits, and it's not fair. So I thought, well, I'm an engineer now. I have a degree. I can make anything I want now. I'm going to make an engineering toy for girls. And I'm going to give them the opportunity that I didn't have so that they can discover a passion for engineering much earlier than I did. So I got to work. I quit my job, and I worked out of my apartment for months, making a prototype out of thread spools and wooden dowels, pieces I could find from the hardware store. I wanted to find a way to help girls develop their spatial skills. I did all of this research. I met with little girls, and I found something really interesting. I'd buy construction toys and watch them play with them to see how they could be improved. And time again, the girls would get bored with the toys. And so I'd say, well, then what is your favorite toy? And they'd run upstairs and they'd bring back down a book. And they'd say, I love reading, let's read together. So I came up with a really simple aha idea. What if I put those two things together? Spatial plus verbal, a construction set plus stories. And what if those stories were about a girl engineer character named Goldilocks? And as she goes on adventures, she solves problems by building simple machines. And so the girls read along and they get to build with Goldie. And it would bring in a role model, and it would bring in the narrative that they so love. I made this prototype, and I went around the Bay Area testing it on hundreds of kids. And it worked. I had little girls in tutus building belt drives. It was awesome. And I knew I was onto something. So I had all of these ramshackle prototypes in my apartment, and I'd been working for months like a hermit, not showering. And a friend of mine said, Debbie, do you want to take this to the next level? Do you trust me? I said, yeah. Do you trust me? I'm like, okay, we're not in a movie. What are you talking about? He said, you need to apply to this tech accelerator program. It is the most elite program in Silicon Valley. All the top engineers around the world vie for a position in this program. You need to apply. So I applied, and I got into the big interview day. And I walked into a room of Mark Zuckerbergs sitting there on their computers. Meanwhile, me walking in, the chick with the physical prototype. And I had a napkin over it because obviously I had to protect my intellectual property. And so I'm walking in there, and gosh, do I not fit in. And one of the guys pipes up and says, oh, did you bring us cookies? Well, my confidence was pretty shot, and needless to say, I didn't get into the accelerator. They didn't understand why on earth I would add a book. So they didn't get it. But I didn't give up. So I brought my prototype to the New York Toy Fair. It is the international biggest toy show in the US. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to go. I'm going to show toy industry veterans. I'm going to talk to store owners and see what they have to say about my engineering toy for girls. And I walked in there thinking, Toy Fair is going to be awesome. There's going to be all these creative types, mad scientists, kids running around. It's going to be so cool. It was a bunch of old men in suits. I don't fit in. Like, come on, I got through engineering, and now this? So I showed people my prototype, and they all kind of looked at me with pity. And they whispered me a well-known industry secret. Construction toys for girls don't sell. And they took me by the arm, and they showed me what does sell. The pink aisle. And they said, this is the way it is. And so we've come full circle. And I felt pretty dejected after that toy fair, but I wasn't willing to give up. Just because this is the way things are doesn't mean it's how they have to be. And so I took my prototype, I partnered with a factory, and I turned it into a real toy. The thing was, the factory minimum order was 5,000 toys. And with all of this rejection, I didn't know if people were going to want it. So I put it up on Kickstarter. I had a goal of raising $150,000 in 30 days to make this toy a reality. I hit go, I crossed my fingers, and I hit my goal in 4 days. And our minimum production, it didn't end up being 5,000 units. It ended up being over 20,000. I had stores calling from all over the world saying, my customers are coming in, they want GoldieBlox. What is this GoldieBlox? I had parents calling in saying, yes, my daughter is more than just a princess. I had press writing articles all about it. The world was waiting for this. They wanted this. The toy industry had it wrong. Yeah, sure, some girls like princesses and tiaras, and I like that stuff too. But there's so much more to us than that. There's so much potential. And for me, I couldn't be more happy to be putting my engineering skills into this product because it leverages not only the math and science that I worked so hard to learn, but it also leverages my creativity. And engineering is such a creative thing, and I never knew it. And it's so fun for me to get to use my creative voice and my artistic skills as a part of engineering. And it's so important that we include that perspective. And the other thing that's so great about it is engineering is for people. We're designing things for people. So how fun for me to get to spend my time playing and learning with little girls and understanding what their needs are and designing things for them. It couldn't be more rewarding. Our toys are now hitting the doorsteps of thousands of girls around the world. I just got an email from a mom who said, we love playing GoldieBlox. My 4.5-year-old, halfway through the game, looked at me and said, Mommy, am I an engineer? And her mom said, yes, sweetie, you can be. You can be anything. For so long, for so many years, I felt like I didn't fit in. But now, I feel like I belong here. I feel like I belong, and our little girls do too. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I've made a lot of choices in my life that have led me to where I am now, many of them considered crazy, either by me or by other people. But they've led me to where I am now and who I am now. And Denise already told you a little bit of that, but some of that is model, dancer, mechanical engineering student, and team lead of the Waterloo Formula Motorsports team. One of my goals is to change the stereotype of what a female engineer looks like. In fact, I met someone just the other day who works on deciding, or not deciding, I guess, but looking into why girls do and don't study or pursue studies in fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. And when I said I was a third-year mechanical engineering student, she looked at me and said, huh, really? That's unusual. So even people that are trying to change the stereotype are helping enforce the stereotype. So just a little tidbit to show you that people do look at me like I'm crazy on a regular basis. And so I guess that's kind of enforcing the title and the theme of my talk. So let's take a moment and picture crazy. What comes to mind? Well, what comes to my mind is the MotoGP rider going full out on the corner, full speed ahead, leaning their bike, scraping their knee on the ground, and going full out to get what they want, which is the race win. Now, making a crazy choice is similar in the sense that you have to take that risk to gain what you want, what you desire. Now, what does taking that risk mean for you? It might be a job opportunity, it might be a trip, it might be doing something that you wouldn't normally do. What does taking that risk mean for you? To tell you about my crazy choices and how they've led me to where I am now, I'm going to take you back to high school when I was deciding what I was going to pursue, what I was going to study. I was seen as the complete girly girl. I did 10 years of competitive dance. I was a cosmetician. I was already working on my shoe collection, and still growing, obviously. And I told all my teachers and friends that I was going to pursue mechanical engineering, and they all looked at me like I was crazy, and they still kind of do. And I guess what some of them knew and some of them didn't was not only did I love science and math, I also loved workshop class, where I got to use machinery, use tools. I got to design things and go and make them myself. And I thought that was the coolest thing, and that is why I chose mechanical engineering. So to me, it wasn't so crazy. It all kind of fit together and made sense. The summer before university, something happened. It was great. I went to a race. I had the opportunity to go to Mosport and watch an American Le Mans race. Now, something happened to me. I fell in love with racing. I just loved the sound, the smell, the atmosphere, just being so close to these cars going by. They look beautiful, they sound cool, it's just awesome. And I fell in love with racing. And if we refer back to Amy's speech earlier about listening to your DNA and your calling, and that was a moment for me that I decided to follow my passion, racing, and I've been heading in that direction ever since. When I came to university, I found this perfect team, a team that designs and builds race cars from the ground up and then competes against other universities from around the world. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, but there was a problem. It was a really big team, and they were all men. They were all male, and I was extremely, extremely intimidated. They talked like they knew everything about cars. I mean, I knew I was interested, but I couldn't talk technically about the cars whatsoever. And so I was intimidated. I stood in the sidelines, and I didn't join the team, thinking, that's crazy. I can't join. That's crazy. It's almost cliche to say, but it took a near-death experience for me to learn an important lesson. I contracted a rare virus which caused meningitis and presented itself in the form of what seemed like strokes. So the excruciating headaches, the partial body paralysis, the speech impediment, and it was physical torture and pain for me. It was mental torture for my friends and family, and really scary for everyone to go through because the doctors didn't know what I had for over a week, and they told my parents to prepare for the worst, for eventual possible death. And luckily, I had a coworker at the time come and visit me in the hospital, and he inspired me to create a bucket list. So I did, and luckily I left that hospital with my life. I fought it off. The doctors are still confused as to how I made it, but I did. And I left the hospital with my life and that bucket list. But that bucket list represented the opportunities that I was going to take from that point forward. So I decided I was going to approach life like the motorcycle. I was going to scrape my knee on the ground. I was going to go all out and just do whatever life throws at me and just go for it. So things like the cliche skydiving, right? But also things like I got to co-drive for Crazy Leo, one of Canada's Canadian Rally Championship drivers. It was just really cool to co-drive for him. I got to be a flag girl for one of my favorite racing teams, the Flying Lizards. I got to travel London, Paris, Germany. I even got to meet the first female engineer to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So that was pretty incredible. That's Lena Gade. And as Denise mentioned, or as she said, fan of NASCAR. That's not exactly how I would say it. I worked for NASCAR as an official this past summer, which is an exciting opportunity that I definitely jumped on. And bringing you back to my story, I returned to school and I joined the Formula team. So that was wonderful. Like, that crazy choice, of course, didn't seem so crazy anymore because I was like, I'm doing it, I don't care. So, and I mean, people, I guess, were grateful that I did, or were supportive that I did, and definitely didn't treat me any different. I was one of the guys, and it was great. I got to help build the car, I got to go to competition, I got to really be part of the team. Even a few months into my time with the team, there was a fourth-year designer that couldn't complete his duties as chassis designer. And we had no one to pick up the slack. So here I was, my second year, only girl on the team, still new to all this, really, a few months before, I didn't know what a chassis even was. And I said, you know what, hey, I'll do it, I'll take it on. So that was definitely crazy, but I did it anyways. I learned all the programs that I needed to learn, and I figured it out and I made it work. I worked long nights, and whether people saw me working or not, and that definitely helped validate that I was in the right field. I was making it work for me. I was making engineering work together with my passion, my newfound passion for racing, and I knew I was headed in the right direction. So that's something, a crazy choice, I'm proud to say I made. So just as everything is going great, school-wise, I've figured it all out, it's all coming together, I learned that you can't control everything that happens in your life. For me, that can be described as this photo. I, at the time, was very happy, engineering and racing, it's all going great. But there's a part of me that's missing. I wasn't completely as feminine as I used to be. So I started dancing again, and I found modeling, and to me that fit. I am those two people in one. It just all works for me. So I had planned a photo shoot for outdoors, and of course the Canadian winter did not agree, so I brought the photo shoot indoors, and to a building that was familiar, which of course is an engineering building. And the car was there, and the photo was taken. It wasn't planned, it wasn't to be released, it wasn't part of the original photo shoot plans. But it did get taken, and, well, that was how it was taken, essentially. But when I look at this photo, I see my femininity and my passion for race cars, the two key things that identify who I am. But unfortunately, to the outside perspective, it's just another model with a race car. And that's an image that the university clearly does not want to promote, and I can't blame them. I said before that you can't control everything that happens in your life, but you can control the lessons that you learn and how you decide to move forward afterwards. The important lesson I learned was the power of perspectives, the ability to put myself in someone else's shoes and look at a situation for how they see it, not just how I see it. Now that's an important lesson I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. I also learned a lot of important lessons about myself. I guess I forgot to tell you. The Formula team was suspended, unable to compete at competition that season. I withdrew from my studies and I hit rock bottom. That was kind of an important thing to tell you. And anywho, I did return to my studies. I decided to face my fears, and that was the most terrifying feeling. I don't wish it upon anyone, but I had to return to my studies. I had to return and face the team that had gone through this turmoil of suspension. I had to work with the people responsible for the team and my punishment every day. I had to face people pointing and staring and saying, look, that's her. I might be exaggerating a little bit on the last part, but it really honestly felt like it. And it was the worst thing to go through, and it was dreadful. But luckily, there were friends, family, and key faculty members that really helped me keep my head up high, face my fears, and take it all one day at a time. I ended up designing another chassis for the Formula team, now becoming team lead, and definitely continuing to take my motto of taking those risks. So I choose crazy. I have been, and I still will. I accept that the good and the bad and the ugly is going to come along with it, but I still choose crazy. Now my question to you is, will you cruise through life, missing opportunity, missing those chances, just taking her easy? Or will you take those risks? Will you take that chance? Will you scrape your knee on the ground and take those risks to take yourself where you want to be? Thank you.
Let's get more girls in STEM. How do we get more girls in STEM? The 9 best STEM toys for girls in 2020. If you search girls in STEM on Google, you get 450 million hits. And this clearly shows our obsession with getting more girls in STEM. I'm sure, from STEM Barbies to coding camps, you guys have seen it all. Getting more girls in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics careers is the right thing to do because STEM needs women and women need STEM. STEM needs a diverse workforce to solve the complex problems that just can't wait. Women also need STEM to get a much-deserved seat at the table and to enjoy the social and economic benefits of working in STEM professions. Currently, only 28% women constitute the workforce in STEM jobs in the US. So, getting more girls in STEM is urgent and important. But there is only one problem with this solution. And that is the leaking bucket that's waiting for these girls as soon as they join the STEM workforce. Studies show that more than 40% women leave STEM jobs in just 5 years of starting. So even today, where we are statistically very close to having over 50% women representation in the undergraduate STEM degree programs in the US, we still only have 28% women in the actual jobs. So we're getting more girls into a bucket that's leaking and are not really addressing the gender gap in these professions. Which leads me to ask a couple of intriguing questions. What if keeping women in STEM is more important than getting more girls in STEM? And what if there's a way to repair this leaking bucket? As a child, I always wanted to be an engineer. My dad only had 2 obsessions, Bollywood and making me an engineer. My parents' constant encouragement and my role model, the late astronaut Kalpana Chawla, really paved the path of engineering for me. In 2012, I moved to the US and studied in the same classroom as her. I was fired up, excited, and full of possibilities. After getting my master's in mechanical engineering, I found my dream job in manufacturing. And I was thoroughly enjoying the first 3 to 4 years of working in STEM. Until one day, I started feeling a little bit lost. I didn't know where to go from here. I just couldn't visualize the next steps. Even though Kalpana Chawla taught me that no dream is too big as a child, now as an adult, I wanted to meet relatable women who were really succeeding in STEM jobs. But everywhere I looked, I found the same STEM Barbies and the same coding camps. And guess what? Even I joined forces. In 2017, I started my podcast, Her STEM Story, to get more girls in STEM. What started as a way to inspire my 14-year-old cousin and many girls like her, surprisingly started motivating me to stay in STEM. Stories like the story of Vishakha Mallya, who is a first-generation Indian American, a computer science engineer, and an LGBTQ advocate, and a professional model, really inspired me to explore my success definition and to believe in my own brilliance. Every week, I was interviewing diverse women with diverse STEM stories. From the CEOs to the science communicators, I somehow found them all. The more women I interviewed, the more I realized that if us women want to succeed in STEM, the secret is to find relatable role models. These women that I was interviewing were way more than just women in STEM. They were paving their unique path in STEM careers. So by diversifying the pool of role models for myself, I was able to find a solid reason to stay in STEM and share these stories with other women who might be at the edge of leaving. If us women want to succeed in STEM, we also need to just look at the 28% women who have stayed in these professions, understand why they have stayed and how they define success. We need to find people who can show us that no dream is too big, but in a more relatable way. Who can tell us that STEM doesn't define us, but we define STEM. So how do we find these perfect role models as women in STEM? I have some tips for you. And don't worry, you don't need to start a podcast. All you need to do is qualify potential role models and people in your existing circles based on 3 simple criteria. Number 1, connect with women who are just 2 or 3 steps ahead of you. One of the biggest mistakes that people make while looking for role models is they directly look up to the CEOs. And it can feel unrelatable and overwhelming. The trick is to find women who are only 2 or 3 steps ahead. Connect with them on social media and just observe their journey. Their influence is way more powerful than you realize. I find almost all my guests, on Instagram, and I recommend you do the same. Just search women in STEM in the search bar and look for women that you can relate to and women who are doing things that you would like to do. Number 2, search for the struggles. This is where the magic happens. People who share the same struggles as us can really show us what's possible beyond those struggles, and they can give us real insight on how to overcome them. How to pivot seems to be a common struggle for women in STEM. Many of my guests have shared their struggles and inspired listeners to pivot like a pro. Like my guest Brittany Stoneberg, who graduated with a degree in English and then went on her way to become a paleontologist. Really inspired my listeners to think beyond what's possible, irrespective of their educational background. And number 3, focus on the details. What kills the search for a perfect role model is to try to find them in your profession or your industry. The real trick is to break those rules and look beyond. Look for the commonalities creatively. It's all in the details, but what matters is what details will you focus on. One of my favorite questions to ask on the show is to find out my guest's favorite book. Learning about someone's favorite book opens a door to their personality and what they might have in common with us. When we share commonalities with someone, it's way easier for us to see ourselves in them. Since finding myself over 100 role models, I have really fallen in love with my STEM career. I'm happy to report that I'm excelling at my 9 to 5. I've grown my podcast and have really defined what success means to me. And I continue to redefine it as I meet more women. When us women in STEM feel continuously successful and inspired in our STEM careers, and we find that through relatable role models, that is when we will stay and grow in STEM professions. And the girls that follow us, they will have more relatable role models and an even brighter future instead of a leaking bucket. Thank you.